Alright guys, welcome along to the Serious Squat Project. Today we're going to be talking about how you can make your squat stronger, how you can do it safer, how you can do it more effectively, but most importantly, how you can smash your PRs. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to set up. We'll go through the various types of squats, the common mistakes people make, and then we'll play right into the weighted stuff. So the first squat variation you need to look at is a simple regular bodyweight air squat. You're looking to get your feet under your shoulders, spread the knees, sit down below parallel, and stand back up again. Okay, nice and simple, nice and straightforward. What you'll see is at the bottom here, my hips are below the level of my knee. I stand back up to full extension, I get back down, and I stand back up again. So, really simple and really straightforward. The most important thing you can do at the start of this, though, is to set your feet up so that your knees don't collapse and to bring your glutes and hamstrings into the movement. So what you'll see here is I start to screw my feet into the ground, and then in the second clip I'll spread the floor. So screwing the feet in like you're trying to corkscrew them through the deck will spread your knees, will turn your glutes on, and just force you to push your knees out in a much more aggressive manner. The second option then is to slide your foot along the ground so that you get a feel for what it's like to spread the floor. So you're not actually going to slide your feet when you're standing there, but what you are doing is trying to put all your weight on the outside of your foot to again engage your glutes and hamstrings a little bit better. So when you do it, what you'll see is my knees pop open and they stay open the entire time. Okay, so you don't want to jam your knees out too far, but you definitely don't want to let them collapse in like this either. You can see them drift in and move around. That's a pretty bad buzz, okay? Over time, that's going to end up with you smashing your knees up and probably ending your squat career prematurely. So get this right from the start, because if you start doing this shit with an empty bar or with light weights, it's only going to get worse as you get heavier. The main reason why your knees drop in are twofold. The first one is your quads are trying to take over the movement, or from the other side, your glutes and hamstrings aren't strong enough to complete it. The second then is that you may have some sort of ankle mobility restriction, which brings your knees in hunting for some extra range of motion. The second reason why the knees collapse in is sometimes if you have an ankle mobility restriction, you're going to end up going hunting for extra range of motion. That's obviously not good, but the problem here isn't your knees or your glutes, it's just that you have an ankle restriction. Again, you need to get screened and you need to make sure that that isn't an issue, because there's no point trying to correct something when it's actually a different thing as the root cause. So, the second major failure I see all the time is people not squatting down deep enough. So half squat jackasses. There's no point doing this, guys, okay? All you're doing is lifting for your ego, you're putting your back at risk, and eventually you're gonna have to take a step back and do it properly. So the reason why this is half squat or short range of motion is because the crease in my hips here, where my pointer is, has never got below the top of my knees. That's the absolute minimum you're looking for when it comes to squatting, because if you can't do that, you've nothing to measure against. How would you know how deep you've gone? How do you know if you haven't stopped short? So it's really simple. Make sure you get to full depth each time. The second failure then that we're going to talk about from this side is rounding your back out. Now, this just looks ugly, number one, but if I had a heavy bar sitting on my shoulders here, the amount of torque and torsion going through my lower back would be disgraceful. So I failed to lock up my back, I failed to engage my core, and now all I've got going on is I'm hoping my vertebrae and their discs hold together so I don't get smashed too badly. So if you're not squatting with a straight back, and if you're not keeping your lower back in a neutral position, again, there's something much deeper that you need to investigate. Alright, so the next failure to talk about are the hips rising first. One of the biggest reasons this happens is your legs just simply aren't strong enough. It sounds counterintuitive, because what you'll see here is the back takes up the brunt of the work, so one might assume their back is a problem, but no, it's really your legs. So let's watch this really quickly on the first rep, and then we'll talk about it on the second rep. So hips go down, hips shoot up. So in this position here, what's going on? Your legs haven't been strong enough to impart force onto the bar, which would be on your back, and drive it up. Instead, they've shot up first themselves, which leaves your back then to finish the lift like a good morning or like a deadlift. So, you know, people are really adept at getting their squat finished any way they want to finish it. But long term, the safest position, the strongest position to be in is one of biomechanical efficiency. This most certainly is not that position. So make sure you're squatting properly, make sure your hips aren't kicking up first and your shoulders aren't kicking forwards, because if they are, you definitely need to bring up your overall leg strength. So things like a lot of high bar squatting with pauses and front squats will help there. Right, so let's talk about the next one. This is the biggest internet powerlifting mistake you can make. If you look on a lot of the popular forums, you'll see people talking about sitting back into the squat, or you need to sit back more, you need to load up your hamstrings, any variation of that. That's great if you're wearing multiply canvas squat suits. It's not so great if you're a raw lifter and your feet are under your shoulders. The reason for that is you've nothing to sit back into, and because your hips are going so far forwards, so far back, your shoulders have to come forward to compensate. Watch what happens when you do that. So now with this vertical shin position, or near vertical, it sends my hips way back. I'm still only just about at parallel, but I've created this crazy long torso angle because I need to keep my shoulders over my feet. If I was straighter in this position and my shoulders were up here where the mouse pointer is, all of a sudden my shoulders are just behind my heels, I fall backwards, you put weight on my back, it's not a good position to be in. So you don't want to sit back too far, because look, it just creates this manky hip position, it takes your lower back out of neutral, and again, it's just going to lead you to good morning, your squats up worse, and it's not really going to do anything for your glutes and hamstrings to this slightly wider stance as some deadlifts wouldn't do anyway. So don't fall into that trap. Now, the biggest beginner mistake people make is that they try to shoot their knees forwards. You know, we're not used to sitting back and loading up our glutes and hamstrings, but we're very good at pushing our knees forwards to get stuff done. So if you're a beginner, or if you haven't lifted in a long period of time, or if you always notice knee pain when you're squatting, this could be an issue for you. So if your hips are or if your knees are shooting forwards, all that's happening here is your patella tendon and your quad tendon are taking up all of the force. Your quads are doing all of the work, your glutes and hamstrings are doing nothing, and because your knee is pushed so far over your toe in this position now, all you've got is a lifetime of knee pain ahead of you. There's nothing wrong with your knees going over your toes when you squat. The only problem is if they get here in the wrong manner, which is this. So let's just watch a couple of reps. Bang, knees get jammed forwards. When you do it as a two-parter and still continue to get to parallel, you do this like seesaw motion. So you've rocked forwards, now you're rocking backwards. Knees are still taking a smashing amount of effort. Knees go forwards, hips go backwards, and whoop-de-doo, I'm just about above parallel still anyway, because if I sat back too far, I'd probably fall over. So all you've got with these mistakes is a really quick way to fuck your body up. Now, we're almost there with the issues you're probably going to have and the ones you need to watch out for. One you definitely want to avoid is getting up onto your toes here. When you get onto your toes, as you can see, my knees have shot forwards a huge amount. There's a huge amount of torque and pressure through the front of my knees, and my glutes and hamstrings are taken out of the movement. One of the biggest reasons why it happens is that ankle mobility just isn't good enough. So let's go about correcting these mistakes. What we're going to talk about over the next couple of minutes is how you can learn how to squat from never doing one right up to smashing out barbell squats. So the first one here is a braced squat. So you're holding a 5 kilo plate out in front of you for a bit of counterbalance. You're just going to squat down and stand up, keeping the plate at approximately eye level. What you'll see on a later video of this is that when I let my chest drop, the plate drops and I get smashed. So plate at face level, knees pushed out wide, hips down below parallel, stand up, kill your squats. If for some reason you let your chest drop, that follows through to your hands and that follows through to your plates, and then all of a sudden you know about it very quickly. The reason why I like this variation so much is that it just makes it hard to fuck it up. So you got to learn to squat properly or else it just won't happen. Once you get the braced squat nailed, the next step to go with is a goblet squat. So you can do this using a dumbbell or a kettlebell or any piece of weight really. You could probably hold a plate in there as well if you wanted. But you're going to hold it up under your chin, elbows in tight, not out wide like I just showed you. And just again, bang through some squats. Because the weight's in front, it'll help counterbalance you so you don't tend to lean forwards, and it'll also allow for a little bit of a helping hand with any sort of ankle mobility restrictions. So this isn't a braced squat, so if you start leaving the weight out in front of you with a heavy weight, all of a sudden it's going to put a lot of stress into your shoulders, throw a lot of torque into your lower back, and your squats are going to go to crap. So make sure you keep the weight against your chest when you're doing this. With the braced squat, the weight's been held out in front for a purpose, and that purpose is to make sure you're counterbalanced and to force you to do it right. Assuming you've got your brace squat down right, the next step then is to get onto your goblet squat and do it properly, which is with the weight against your chest. When you're doing any sort of squat variation, make sure you stand up all the way. Don't leave this little bit of hip range and knee range behind. So make sure you finish out your lifts completely. If for whatever reason you can't perform a good squat without falling over, without your toes rising, without your knees shooting forwards, usually elevating the heels somewhat will help. That's why weightlifters wear weightlifting shoes. As you can see there, it just allows me to sit down a little bit better, sit up a little bit more upright, and just get into an overall more comfortable squat position. Now, there's nothing really too wrong with my squat in either setting, but you know, it's worth trying out to see if it helps a little bit. So now that we've got like the basic squat variations down, that's the braced squat and the goblet squat, we're going to look at bar position. So depending on where you put the bar on your back, you're going to have a number of different effects. The first one and the easiest one to learn is a classic high bar weightlifter style squat. So what you've got there is the bar sitting across the top of your traps, shoulders pulled together, elbows pulled under the bar, and wrist dead straight. This position here forces you to be very upright on the way down, because if you aren't, you'll get smashed forwards and the bar will take the back of your head off. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is going to be a classic low bar style squat position. So the hands come a little bit wider and the bar moves further down your shoulders onto the top, or further down your back onto the top of your shoulders, which then will facilitate a heavier squat. The reason why that is it's more secure on your shoulders, and there's also a shorter distance from the bar to your hip. So because you're shortening the leverage, you end up lifting more weight. If your wrists are getting smashed in this position, your other option is to come out with your thumbs over the bar. So from the base of your thumb to the base of your baby finger, and hold on to a straight wrist position that way. Regardless of which squat variation you choose, it's super important to always keep this straight wrist angle. So anytime you hear me say squat, what I'm really talking about is a traditional back squat. I don't need to say front squat, I don't need to say overhead squat. When I say squat, I mean back squat. And what I mean with the back squat is the bar on top of my shoulders, I'm sitting down all the way to below parallel, and I'm standing back up again. Okay, so no drama from the front. And then from the side, the bar path should move pretty much straight up and down. It should stay over my foot, because if it doesn't, it ends up kicking me out of position and I get screwed. So the first video is a high bar back squat. Now we're going to see a low bar back squat. All you're going to notice with this is that the hips move back a little bit more and the torso position is going to be slightly more inclined. So you can already see at the top I've got a slight lean forwards, and the reason for that is the bar is being kept over the center of my foot. If I was standing too vertical and had the bar in the back of my shoulders, it would fall off and take my arms with me. So when you're low bar squatting, you need a tiny, tiny, tiny little lean forwards that shouldn't change as the set goes on. So if I've done this right, my torso should stay pretty fixed. And yeah, it does. So let's go back and look at how the failure points apply to having the bar in your back. Any of the failures you saw earlier, like your knees collapsing, like your heels rising, and not getting below parallel, all applies here as well. If you can do a good quality body weight squat or a good quality squat with 40 kilos, but you go up to 60, 80 or 100 kilos and all of a sudden your depth becomes compromised, my friend, you've just gone too damn heavy. There's nothing wrong with backing off the weight, but there's definitely something wrong with cutting your squats short. Because if you cut them short for this training cycle, all that's going to happen is every single training cycle thereafter is going to need more of a cheat. Your squats are going to be higher and you're going to end up just looking like some douchebag bodybuilder who does 20 reps at 200 kilos and not one of them even comes close to being more than 3 inches range of motion. Okay, so don't be that guy. Now, slightly less talked about, but definitely still a common one, is lifting your elbows or rounding your upper back when you're trying to squat. So for some reason, the internet has told people that lifting your elbows to create a shelf is a good idea with squatting. Nothing could be further from the truth. When I lift my elbows up, my chest collapses. When my chest collapses, my core goes. when my core goes, all I'm going to do is eat a face full of floor with some weight on my back. I end up leaning forwards too much, and it just turns into this really dog ugly squat. So what you need to have is elbows pulled under the bar, chest tight, and upper back nice and squeezed. Again, here we are talking about sitting too far back. When I sit too far back, watch what happens to the bar. It turns into like this awful good morning style position. My lower back starts to tuck out a little bit, and look, if I put any serious weight on my back there, I'm not having a good time. Now back onto good morning in your squat, or your hips shooting up first. Same story as we talked about with the depth issue. If you can do a good quality squat with 40 kilos, but as you go heavier, this hip kick starts to happen, that is definitely a sign you've gone too far, okay? It just means your legs aren't strong enough to keep up with your bar weight. So in later videos on the Alpha Strength Challenge, what we're going to do is talk about the role of squat assistance exercises in solving these problems. But for now, all I wanted to do is give you a brief overview of how to squat, some of the common mistakes and some of the common corrections. What you're going to need to do is take this away, start to implement some of those tips, use a smarter warm-up, make sure your ankle mobility is okay, make sure your hips work properly, break your squat right down so you can build it back up stronger than it ever has been before.